But we are ready to keep things moving with our next section, maximizing benefits and minimizing costs when adding CRM to Sage 300. And so we're happy to have Paul here.
Excellent. Thank you, Jared. Good morning, everyone, and on the West Coast, and for our friends on the East Coast and other parts of North America. Good afternoon. Also want to say hello to my friends in South America. I should have some people attending from Argentina and Brazil, and also Peru, where we have an office. So today, this is not a technical session. Really what I want to talk about today is to consider why you would add Sage CRM to Sage 300 and the approach you might take to avoid problems. This session is really based on my own experience. A number of years ago, I added Sage CRM to my Sage 300 system, and it actually went well. But what I was trying to do is really just accomplish a couple of things here. I wanted a better way to control the communication with my business partners, and I really needed to escape from email hell, where I was getting buried with emails. I also wanted a system to support our growth. And we have people in 3 different locations in Canada. We have an office in Peru, and every day I'm dealing with people in Brazil. So it takes, I wanted a system that would handle that. And, lastly, I'm an accountant. And as an accountant, many of you are probably in the same boat. We really don't want to have anyone have access to our accounting system that they don't need to. So I needed to give information to people without having to have them in the accounting system. So that's what I did. So what I'm going to cover today is basically, why you would want to add Sage CRM at all. I'm going to be repeating a little bit some of what you've seen before. I'll give you my perspective on some of the key benefits. And I'm going to talk about some of the highlights of the many integration features. There are many. If you were just on Dan Cousin's session, you've seen a really good demonstration of how it integrates with Sage 100. I'm going to show you some of those with Sage 300. I won't be diving into the product as much. I'm going to be talking about those integrations and the reason why we would do them and the value that they bring. I want to get into how we would control a CRM project, how we don't become a statistic of these overspent and under-delivered projects, and lastly, talk about how to get started. Okay, so just a little aside, I mentioned that we have individuals from other countries joining us here. I do want to mention that Sage CRM, like Sage 300, is a multilingual product. Out of the box, it supports many different languages. What you're seeing on the screen is a sales pipeline, perhaps an English-speaking sales manager looking at the pipeline for his Spanish-speaking sales rep. On the bottom, the same pipeline from the sales rep's perspective in Spanish. So not only does the product provide different languages out of the box, it's field level translation, which is really useful for localization issues. As you know, Canadians have perfected the use of English. So we have our own little different versions of English translations. And Brazilian Portuguese is different than Portugal Portuguese. So the product is really quite flexible that way. Okay, so you've got a Sage 300 system. Everything's working well. Why would you ever want to mess that up? And why would you want to add Sage CRM? Well, there's many reasons. One is it's not going to mess it up. It's going to enhance things. But one of the most important things to think about in a business is that not all of our relationships are with customers and vendors. There are many different organizations that we deal with every day. There are potential customers, potential suppliers, or if you're a nonprofit organization, there's donors who are giving you pledges. There's lawyers and accountants. Well, Sage CRM lets you control your communication with all of these individuals, all of the relationships, whether it's emails, whether it's meetings, whether it's appeals for fundraising campaigns. All of those can be handled within the system. And they have nothing to do with your accounting system, but this is a great place to keep them. You can organize them much, much better than you would in email program like Outlook. You can organize them by sales opportunity, by support case, by a fundraising drive, etc. So I'm going to show you some of that today. But if you already have customers in your Sage 300 system, why would you integrate those with the Sage CRM? Well, because it enhances the relationship. So I'm going to talk about that. I mean, in our accounting system, we take care of billing. We know about paying people. But what about other things that are important in the relationship? What about a key customer who has just opened a support case? That's quite important, and it might be something that your sales rep should be aware of. It has nothing to do with accounting at this point. It has a lot to do with personal relationships. The other thing that often has difficulty in companies is when you have a customer that your sales rep's been catering to for many, many months. They've been bringing them along, and now they want to place an order. The difficulty of doing that sometimes because of this onboarding that we have to do with credit checks and all of this sort of information that we have to now set up in the accounting system just to let them place the order can be onerous. With Sage CRM, that's made much, much simpler, and I'll talk a bit about that. And the last aspect of this is customer care. You've done a lot to bring your customers online. What can you do with Sage CRM to keep them? So I'm going to talk about that. First of all, real nice and simple, when you're in Sage CRM, it's very easy to tell if you have a company that is not a customer or a vendor of Sage 300 and one that is. Very, very simple. The one on the top is Gatecom Inc. We're going to use a lot of that today. The type of customer's prospect, that just means that it's not linked to Sage 300. But on the bottom, Coastal Electric Company is a customer. I know that because the type is reserved. Type customer means that it is linked to Sage 300. It also tells me what the customer number is, and it tells me which Sage 300 company I'm linked to. So the obvious implication of this is that one Sage CRM system can be linked to many different Sage 300 companies. So let's look at Gatecom. They're not a customer of ours, but we do have relationships with them. And if we think about the way that we'll communicate with people, I'm looking at the communications tab of Gatecom. I can see on the left-hand side, there's many different ways that I communicate. There's phone calls, there's emails, there's meetings, there's fundraising activities. Everything can be stored in Sage CRM, and everything can be organized. On the top, we're seeing the company with the navigation pane, and that's indicating that we're looking at the company as a whole. So we're looking at all communications to everybody at the company. There happens to be a total of 37 of those. For this company, I'm looking at communications with two people, David and Simon, on this screen. What if I just want to know what Simon is talking to us about? So simply by selecting the communication tab for Simon, CRM tells me where I am now. I'm looking at Simon, who's with the company Gatecom, and I'm looking at just his communications. So there's one that's outstanding that I have to follow up on. Tomorrow I have to actually follow up on a new quote. And there's a bunch of other communications, but just Simon's. On the right-hand side, you see a link under a column that says About. And this is, again, another refinement of the communication. Well, now I can drill into what Simon specifically is communicating with us about. In this company's case, that symbol means there's a sales opportunity. You can customize the symbols. You can make pretty little pictures for them. If I click on one of those indicators, icons, I'm going to open up an opportunity. So now I'm looking at this from the opportunity perspectives. 120 user expense system. The company is Gatecom, and I'm looking at communications with Simon. So again, very specific, slice and dice, very organized, much easier than trying to dig through piles of emails in your Outlook or your Google, your Gmail. Just drawing your attention to the right side, there's a column that says status. Just a nice little indicator that Sage CRM uses to say that that one of these is outstanding, and the ones that are checked green are already completed. Easy visual way to keep track of things. On the left-hand side, the red bar just indicates that these things are overdue. Well, in fact, they're all completed, so I don't have to worry about that. So everything that I've said about communications here for a customer would equally apply for a potential vendor. This happens to be Flyway Airlines. They're talking to us about a travel package. We're not selling them anything, but we still want to keep track of what they promised us. Very easy to do in Sage CRM. Other functions that are available to non-customers. So again, I'm not even talking about Sage 300 at this point. This is just a company in the Sage CRM system, and there's a quick look function. With this function, all of the things I just talked about, communications and opportunities, are available on one page. The third panel has to do with support cases. I don't have any for this particular company, but they would show under this as well. Another really nice feature is dashboards. These can be personalized for individual users, individual groups of users, individual reasons, countries, territories, all of those sorts of segregations. What we see on here is all the company contacts for them. I don't have any cases, but they will be listed here. We see the opportunities that are open, and we see the 120 user opportunity that we talked about before. And we notice that Brian Little is the salesperson for that. So interesting. I want to draw your attention to the related companies area of the dashboard. And I'm going to just expand on that a little bit by clicking on a relationship field in that company. So under Gatecom, there's a relationship tab. And this is interesting because it now starts to expand and give me more information. It tells me that Gatecom is owned by Eurolandia. It's another company in the database. One of the directors is a person called Arnold Ball, and I have two companies that are owned by Gatecom, the children. Other things that are indicated here is there's some siblings, and that's really meant to say it could be sister companies, brother companies, or it could be other things. In this case, it tells me that one of the prime suppliers of Gatecom is A&W Services. It also tells me there's a case, there's a support case out there that's going to affect this company. Important thing to know, and I'm going to show you that a little bit later when I talk about cases. Okay, so all of that information is available to your sales reps, to anyone in the company that has access, and they're not even a customer of the system yet. So lots of reasons to have a CRM system. In addition to what Dan talked about, in addition to what David Beard talked about at the very front, there's lots of reasons to add it and lots of functionality. But now what happens when you integrate them? And that's really the nature of what I'm talking about here. When you have customers and vendors in your accounting system, what can Sage CRM do to make that relationship even better? How can it enhance it? First of all, just a little aside here in terms of taking a company that's not a customer and moving it, it is really quite simple. There's a promote to Sage 300 button. And when you do that, you're asked to provide the company that you want to link it to and a customer number. If it was a vendor, you would be asked to provide a vendor number. This is a function that should be done by very few people in the company because the next question obviously is going to do with credit checks, tax jurisdictions, all of the accounting setup. So in our company, the only person that does this function is our controller. Obviously, for obvious reasons, you just want to make sure that connection is speaking the accounting speak, so not everybody handles that. Once I've connected a company, I'm going to go back and look at Coastal Electric here because that's the company I talked about that is a customer in Sage 300. We see three other functions available in the top menu. AR Inquirer, customer, and OE Inquiry. If this was a vendor, I would see accounts payable, vendor, and purchase order inquiry. Also on the right-hand side of a customer, of a company screen now, we're seeing new functionality. The quote and order were already there. We can place quotes and orders for non-customers, and I'll deal with that later. But item inventory is a new one because now I have full access to the items pricing in my Sage 300 system. All of the pricing that's specific to this customer, whether it's contract pricing, whether it's different areas of pricing specifically for them, are available. Really powerful stuff that's available instantly. If I looked at some of these functions, for instance, I'm now on my customer link, and Dan showed this for Sage 100. we're seeing this for Sage 300 as well. Very valuable stuff for your sales rep when they're phoning a customer, to know that actually in this customer's case, he's got great credit. He's paying off in 41 days. Most of the receivables are current. Everything's aged quite nicely. So this is great information, because before this, the sales rep might have to call accounting or go ahead and make the sale blindly without knowing this. AR inquiry, I'm sorry for the busy slide here. I pasted a lot of things together here. There's basically 5 inquiries for accounts receivable. You can look at posted or unposted invoices, receipts, and refunds. Or as you see on the bottom, your sales rep, if they're given permission, again, everything is tied to securities, they can create an age trial balance for this customer and see exactly what's outstanding. For the posted transactions on the top right, they can drill into these and actually see the detail of each and every invoice and credit note and shipment that's in the system. Very, very useful. Similarly with order entry inquiry, lots of options to look at. Other functions and benefits that you gain from moving a company from CRM to a customer in Sage 300. I mentioned that all pricing is available. This is, one of the great benefits of Sage 300 is very good pricing models. Contract pricing, specific pricing, sale pricing, all of that is now available in Sage CRM without the person having to enter your accounting system. One of the challenges sometimes with a customer, with a company before they become a customer, is they want a quote. Well, you can give a quote now using Sage CRM. The quote comes directly from Sage 300, the same items that are available, the pricing that is available in Sage 300 can be given to a non-customer. If they decide to become a customer later, that information is transferred over to their new customer number, so you don't miss anything. And the kind of the last benefit to think about when you're looking at a company linked to Sage 300, as opposed to just going directly into Sage 300, is that a CRM license is anywhere between 20 and 60% of a Sage 300 user license. On the low end, if there's no bells and whistles, no third-party applications, like we talked about the Greatrix application that Dan demonstrated, or if you're adding a few bells and whistles, you're still much, much cheaper than Sage 300. So there's an economic argument for this as well. Okay, so I talked about some of the benefits of CRM as a standalone program. There's many, many more. I'm not doing justice to it here because you could spend all day on this. I talked about what you get when you integrate, and now I want to talk a bit about customer care. So here are some functions of Sage CRM that really help with customer care. Once synced, forever linked. Sounds like a country song, but it's actually true. So when you've synced a customer to a company to a customer, or a company to a vendor, between the two systems, anything changed in one is obviously changed in the other. So you don't have a situation where your sales system, whether it's spreadsheet based or whatever it was based on, is different than your accounting system. Information can be correct. Dashboards and inquiry. With these ones, you can bring key accounting data directly to your customer care personnel. And you can do a lot with this. You can bring a lot of detailed information. And one of our clients, we bring information about specific leases that they have in their system for the lease of photocopiers directly into the CRM system. There's very powerful notification systems in Sage CRM, on-screen and email notifications. A great example I mentioned earlier is if one of your key customers has opened a support case, it would be really a good idea if that sales rep knew that happened, because that might be a concern for a key customer of your firm. Let's find out about it as soon as it happens, and the system can do that for you. What I really love about Sage CRM myself is the workflows, because often a customer care issue is a matter of process. Your processes are not solid enough. If you had better processes, things wouldn't fall through the cracks. Well, what Sage CRM does through their workflow is enforce those processes, forces you to go through certain steps so that you're not going to be dropping the ball. You'll see processes in the sales cycle. You'll see processes in the customer care cycle. All of these are done with workflows. Case management is a critical component of customer care, and Sage CRM has a very, very comprehensive case management system. Everything from recording the cases, categorizing them, prioritizing them, putting solutions against them is available in the system. I'm showing you a case 5.2 for a company that's called Eurolandia. The reason I wanted to show you that one is that's the one I mentioned earlier on in the system. It's a case that's related to our other company, Gatecom. On the right-hand side, you're seeing some of this workflow that I'm talking about. So while the case itself on this summary screen shows you information about the case, indicates the severity of it, tells you what stage it's at, and the fact that it's actually a software bug, what we're seeing on the right is that we can walk it through a workflow. We might indicate that we're waiting for the customer to come back to us, or we might queue it to somebody else in a level 2 that has to handle this case. Easily done with the workflow, no information is dropped. Okay. I mentioned the relationships. So again, in cases, there's a relationship there. If we remember, when we're looking at Gatecom, it told us, the system told us that Gatecom is affected by this case. Therefore, when I'm looking at the case, I should see that connection as well. When this case is resolved, when this case is outstanding or resolved, it affects another company. And we see that here. Move ahead now. So going back to the agenda, what I want to talk about now is, I think you're going to see in a lot of the sessions, there's lots of reasons to add Sage CRM. I have gone through it quickly because a lot of the other sessions are going to dive into more detail. I think I'm just going to assume that the benefit is something that you see, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here. But I want to talk now about how we take on a project like this and not blow it, to be honest with you. So, industry studies show that anywhere between about 40 to 50% to 65% of new Sage projects fail. They're huge expenditures and little to show for it. So how do you avoid that? Well, there's lots of people with opinions on this. I'm going to give you mine. As much as possible, out of the box, there's so much functionality in the software that you probably don't have to change as much as you think you might have to change when you first look at it. Try it out of the box, because changes are expensive and changes can lead to problems. However, they're very easy to do. When your business partner trains you in Sage 300, they'll train you on some of the administrative tasks. You'll see how easy it is to make changes. It also is easy to screw up and have some side effects you didn't think about. Lastly, ask the right questions. And what do I mean by that? If you ask the question to your business partner or to a developer especially, can this be done? Can I add something? The answer is always yes, because Sage CRM, although it has a lot of functionality, is really essentially a development environment. Anything can be done. But is that the question you want to ask? Or should you ask, do you really want this change? Who else is going to be affected by the change? Think about that. It takes some time. And do you have time to test this properly? I think that's the single best question you can ask yourself, because you have to test it properly. Then you can talk about, can it be done? How much will it cost? And do benefits exceed the costs? David Beard talked about this a bit earlier. Drill into the business case for any change you want to make to the system before you make changes. Test, test, test. And we really encourage that you have a complete test environment with your Sage CRM server, your Sage 300 server, any other key applications that you use, because even simple changes need to be tested, because you may get some results that you had not counted on. There's a great function in Sage CRM called component management for bigger changes, where all of your changes are recorded. And when you implement them to the system, it's just a matter of copying the components. Very useful thing to do. Very good way to recover. So let's assume you want to go ahead. How do you start? first of all, talk to your people. Find out why you're even looking at this system. I think David's comments from this morning were really, really good in terms of looking at what is this solving for you. And it might be a lot, but ask around. It's not just one department with a product like this. Today's sessions is a great way to start. You're going to get a lot of information from today. And we live in a video world, right? So YouTube has got an absolute ton of information on Sage CRM. Sage City, as you've seen, I think David said over 260 videos on there, more every day. And talk to your business partner. They're going to know about the product quite well. I would suggest a phased approach and keep it simple. And an agile approach makes a lot of sense. If you're going to come up with a great new system that's going to change your company entirely, start with the first step and launch that step, because your assumptions that you're making for your grand plan might be wrong. And the best way to find this out is get something out there and have your users test it. They're going to tell you if you're wrong, and you're going to save a lot of time that you would have spent if you did it all at once and launched this grand scheme. So folks, look, Sage CRM is a real game changer. It can be an amazing boost to your company. Get started, let the system adapt, and it'll change with you.